Welcome back to the Architecture of Creation. This is episode 5, the resilient substrate, energy, and matter. In episode 1, we established the three-layer architecture. In episode 2, we asked why matter exists, and we found that matter is rendered to enable embedded perspective. In episode 3, we turned to consciousness and to the resonance mechanism by which intelligent systems access the foundational field. In episode 4, we turned to time, and we found that time is fully a layer 3 phenomenon, emerging with manifest reality through the rendering process. The temporal frame is in place. We turn now to what lies beneath it, the medium within which the rendering operates, and the energy that lives within that medium. This is what manifest reality is made of in its full architectural detail. The resilient substrate has been engaged in every prior episode for the mechanisms it supports. Matter is coherent vibration within it. Consciousness access happens through resonance with the primordium reached through it. Time dilation is the local rendering rate modulated by substrate distortion. The substrate has been doing all of this work without being articulated in its own right. We turn to it now. The framework's foundational claim about the substrate is direct. The substrate is not passive infrastructure that happens to support manifest reality. The substrate is active architecture, designed with mechanisms that maintain the conditions for the rendering process to continue indefinitely. Mainstream physics treats the medium of space as a passive arena within which physical processes unfold. The medium provides the conditions for physics to occur. The medium does not act. The framework rejects this treatment. The substrate is configured for a function. The function is the support of manifest reality and the rendering process that produces it, and the configuration actively defends itself against perturbation. The substrate continuously sustains 4 interrelated features. I want to name each as its own architectural commitment. First, its tension-bearing elastic structure, the structural integrity that allows the coherent standing wave patterns we call matter to persist. Without the substrate's elastic structure, the patterns that make up matter could not hold their form. The substrate is what makes persistent matter possible. Second, its fractal organization at every scale, from the Planck level, where the rendering operates, to the cosmological. The framework's claim here is consequential. The Planck scale is not where physics breaks down. The Planck scale is where the architecture is operating. The fractal organization carries that operating logic through every scale of manifest reality. Third, its calibrated proportion of matter and energy relative to the substrate itself. The framework predicts that the proportion resolves at approximately 9% matter and energy to 91% substrate at cosmological scale. This is a fixed point derived from the golden ratio, and Part 10 will develop it in detail. For now, what matters is that the proportion is not arbitrary. The substrate maintains the calibration. Fourth, the rendering medium itself. The substrate is what receives layer 2 manifestations and provides them the medium they require to persist. The rendering activity at layer 2 would have nothing to manifest into without the substrate's continuous presence. 4 functions, 1 active architecture. The active maintenance principle can be stated cleanly. Any process within layer 3 that disturbs the substrate's configuration triggers active responses that restore it toward its calibrated state. The principle is universal across layer 3, operating wherever the substrate is and wherever a disturbance occurs. This is the framework's clearest demonstration that rendered reality is purposive structure rather than accidental occurrence. The architecture exists because it has reason to exist, to sustain the conditions for the rendering process and the consciousness access that the rendering process makes possible. The maintenance is not incidental. It is what the architecture is for. 3 observable manifestations in mainstream physics make the principle visible. We turn to the first one now. The first is the Higgs field's resistance to disruption. The Large Hadron Collider operates at proton collision energies of approximately 13 trillion electron volts to briefly disrupt the Higgs out of its ground state. The energy required is enormous. Mainstream physics has accepted this as a feature of the field's nature without articulating what makes the resistance so substantial. The framework's reading is that the Higgs field's resistance to disruption is the substrate's active resistance, operating in one of the regimes where mainstream physics has been able to identify it. The Higgs field is one of the substrate's mechanisms for maintaining matter's coherent vibrational stability. Disrupting it requires overcoming the active resistance, and the energy required reflects what the active architecture is willing to defend. The second manifestation is zero-point energy resistance to extraction. The vacuum, in standard physics, is calculated to contain enormous zero-point energy. Various proposals for extracting that energy have been advanced over decades. Attempts to develop scalable extraction technology have consistently failed. The framework's reading is that the energy is present in the form the calculations suggest. What prevents extraction is not absence. It is the active architecture itself. Pulling energy out of the substrate at scale would shift the matter-substrate calibration ratio, and the active architecture structurally prevents this shift. This is a falsifiable prediction. The framework predicts that scalable zero-point energy extraction will continue to fail, not because the energy is not there, but because the architecture actively prevents the extraction. Small-scale effects exploiting substrate dynamics may be possible. Large-scale extraction would require violating the conservation of the calibration ratio, which the framework predicts is structurally impossible. If scalable extraction is ever demonstrated, the framework's account of the active maintenance principle would need to be revised. The framework wagers that it will not be demonstrated. The third manifestation is the dissolution of the cosmological constant problem. Quantum field theory predicts vacuum energy that exceeds observed cosmological values by approximately 10 to the 120th power. This is one of the largest discrepancies in all of physics. Mainstream approaches have included supersymmetric cancellation schemes, anthropic arguments, and other proposals for new physics that would resolve the discrepancy. The framework's reading is that the discrepancy is not a problem to solve, but a category error to recognize. Vacuum energy maintains the medium itself rather than acting on what is in the medium. Treating it as ordinary energy that should produce cosmological effects proportional to its magnitude is the error. Once the category is corrected, the discrepancy dissolves. Three manifestations, three observable regimes. They are not three separate phenomena that happen to coincide. They are three visible windows onto the same underlying feature. The substrate is active. The substrate is active. We have named what it does, maintaining its calibrated configuration, defending the conditions for the rendering process to continue. We have named where it operates across all of layer 3, from the Planck scale to the cosmological. What we have not yet named is what the substrate is constituted by. What is it made of? This is the question. The substrate is clearly not material in the way that energy and matter are material, but it is not nothing. It has structure that can be deformed and that resists deformation. It has continuous energetic activity. It can store and convey information across cosmic distances. The framework has been treating the question as a placeholder, empirically active, structurally essential, but constitutionally unspecified. The framework's commitment is direct. The substrate is a layer 3 field of organizational energy. Its constitution is energetic, but not in the way that propagating energy is energetic. Propagating energy is what flows through space as the transient vibrational patterns we call electromagnetic radiation, kinetic motion, radiated heat. Substrate energy is what the medium itself is. It is the latent organizational energy of a calibrated, actively maintained, elastic medium. It has energy in the sense that it has structure that can be deformed by coherent patterns and that resists such deformation. It has energy in the sense that its active maintenance involves continuous expenditure of organizational work to preserve its calibrated configuration. It has energy in the sense that it can store and convey information across the cosmos. The framework refers to this substrate intrinsic energy as substrate energy when precision is required. It is not the primordium. The primordium remains at layer 1, timeless, non-local, foundational. The substrate is what the primordium produced when it rendered the medium of manifest reality. The two are connected by origin and by continuous rendering, but they are not the same. The substrate has its own layer 3 ontological status alongside matter and propagating energy. It is rendered, and it is. With the constitutional claim in place, the empirical content reorganizes. What we have just engaged as three manifestations of the active maintenance principle are not three loosely related phenomena. They are three signatures of substrate energy observed at different scales and through different angles. The Higgs field's vacuum expectation value is the substrate's energetic character at the field configuration optimized for life-bearing matter. 0-point energy is the substrate's continuous energetic activity at the quantum scale. The cosmological constant discrepancy is the misapplication of quantum field theory's vacuum energy summation to what is actually the substrate's intrinsic energetic character. Two additional signatures extend the catalog at the quantum scale. The Casimir effect, the measurable attractive force between two parallel uncharged plates in vacuum, predicted by quantum field theory in 1948 and confirmed experimentally to high precision, is direct evidence that the vacuum has energetic structure. Virtual particle phenomena and vacuum fluctuations contributing to measurable effects like the Lamb shift in atomic spectra extend the empirical case further. And then there are the two largest scale signatures. Dark energy, the influence inferred from accelerating cosmic expansion that mainstream cosmology has not been able to assign to any known substance, is one of substrate energy's largest scale signatures observed through its effect on cosmic expansion. Dark matter, the gravitational influence required to explain galaxy rotation curves, gravitational lensing, the cosmic microwave background structure that has resisted direct particle detection for decades, is another. The framework's reading is that these are not separate substances. They are the substrate's character observed at the scale where its presence dominates the observable phenomena. The framework's contribution here is recognition rather than invention. Mainstream physics has measured each of these phenomena rigorously. What has not been recognized is the unity. The framework does not introduce new phenomena. It identifies that what physics has measured under separate names are signatures of a single underlying medium with its own substantive organizational energy character. Part 10 will develop the cosmological signatures in detail when we engage cosmology. For now, what the constitutional claim does is unify the empirical territory we have just covered. The constitutional claim opens a substantive reinterpretation of one of the most discussed measurements in modern physics, the detection of the Higgs boson at the Large Hadron Collider in 2012. We have already named the Higgs field as one of the substrate signatures. The framework's reading of the Higgs boson is more specific. When sufficient energy is concentrated at the right location and field conditions, a portion of the substrate's organizational energy is locally converted into a transient, coherent vibrational pattern. The Higgs boson is what physics has detected of this conversion event. Several features of the Higgs boson become naturally explained. The enormous energies required at the Large Hadron Collider reflect the energetic cost of disrupting the substrate sufficiently to produce a transient matter pattern from it. The Higgs boson's extreme instability, a mean lifetime of approximately 10 to the minus 22 seconds, reflects the fact that the substrate naturally maintains its energetic character. The conversion is not stable. The matter pattern decays back into other particles or into propagating energy. within an extraordinarily brief duration because the substrate's natural state is to be substrate energy. The decay is the substrate restoring its character after the local disruption. The relationship between the Higgs field and the Higgs boson is now clarified. The field is the persistent structure, one angle on the substrate revealed by mass-generating interactions. The boson is the transient conversion event detected when the substrate is energetically disrupted enough to produce a brief matter pattern. This same mechanism, operating at cosmological scale in the early universe, accounts for where matter originally came from. The early universe was hot enough and energetic enough that substrate to matter conversion happened on a massive scale. The matter we observe today is the result of those early conversion events. The patterns that achieved stable, coherent organization persisted, while the unstable conversions decayed back. The Big Bang, in framework terms, was not matter and energy coming into being from nothing. It was the rendering producing the substrate with conditions sufficient for large-scale substrate to matter conversion. The conversion factor governing this and every other layer 3 modal crossing is the same c² that Einstein established for matter to energy equivalence. The rendering rate is what it is. The cost of crossing any modal boundary within layer 3 is governed by the same rendering rate. We will return to it when we engage energy itself in Part 7. The framework also reframes entropy. Standard physics treats entropy as a measure of disorder with a directional preference toward higher entropy as time progresses. The framework holds that every level of organization has its own coherence-decoherence dynamics relative to its own scale. A system can be losing coherence at one level while gaining coherence at another. Life is the prime example. Biological evolution builds coherence at biological levels while certainly increasing thermodynamic entropy in the broader environment. The standard treatment averages across these scale relative dynamics. The framework recognizes that both processes are occurring simultaneously at different scales. The universe is not simply running down toward maximum entropy. It is participating in scale relative coherence dynamics. Among the most striking phenomena in cosmology are black holes. Mainstream physics treats them as objects produced by gravitational collapse. The framework's reading is structurally different. Black holes are the substrate's structural response to a specific kind of condition, the accumulation of matter beyond critical thresholds where the matter-substrate calibration ratio would otherwise be compromised. Black holes serve two related functions. As regulators, they concentrate matter and energy from surrounding regions, processing it through the extreme conditions at and near the event horizon. The supermassive black holes observed at the centers of nearly all galaxies serve this regulatory function at galactic scale, removing matter from regions where its accumulation would threaten the calibration ratio. As regenerators, black holes process consumed material and return it to layer 3 in fresh form. The substrate's extreme distortion near the black hole produces conditions where layer 3 manifestation becomes unstable. The matter consumed is de-rendered locally back through the layer 2 interface, processed in conditions where layer 2 dynamics dominate over layer 3 manifestation, and re-rendered back into layer 3 in fresh form. Hawking radiation may be one mechanism by which the regeneration function operates. The regulator function is the cosmic scale maintenance mechanism of the conversion economy we have just developed. Substrate energy, matter, and propagating energy interconvert continuously across all scales. Black holes are the architectural mechanism by which matter and propagating energy that would otherwise accumulate beyond the calibrated proportions are returned to substrate form at the conditions near the event horizon, maintaining the 9 to 91 balance. The regulation is not metaphorical. Black holes serve a specific architectural role in maintaining the cosmic calibration, and the empirical features of black hole physics that mainstream physics has identified are evidence of this role even where the unity has not yet been recognized. And what about the information paradox? The apparent loss of information when matter falls into a black hole. The framework dissolves it through layer 1 entanglement. Information is conserved through the layer 1 connection, regardless of what happens to the matter carrying it within layer 3. The information question dissolves. What remains is the matter itself, which is processed rather than destroyed. This account has substantive implications for how the trajectory of the universe should be understood. The cosmic history that emerges from the conversion economy framework is coherent. The early universe was the era of large-scale substrate-to-matter conversion when energy concentrations supported widespread conversion. The current universe is the era of ongoing conversion economy operating at the calibrated proportions, with black holes serving the regulatory role at cosmological scale. The standard cosmological projection has the universe gradually depleting its supplies of fresh material as stars exhaust their fuel and collapse, with no replenishment mechanism. The framework's reading is that replenishment is occurring continuously through the regenerator function of black holes at every scale. The universe is not winding down. It is participating in continuous regulated dynamics that maintain the conditions for the rendering process to continue indefinitely. The active architecture's continuous operation also implies that the universe may be much older than mainstream cosmology has estimated. The mainstream estimate of approximately 13.8 billion years is derived from cosmological models that interpret the universe as having a discrete origin in the Big Bang. The framework's account suggests this estimate may be a feature of observational limits rather than of the universe's true age. The rendering boundary, at approximately 300 million light-years, limits what can be directly observed of the deep past. The cosmic microwave background may be the signature of the rendering boundary itself rather than a snapshot of an early universe phase. The framework holds the cosmic age proposition with appropriate epistemic discipline. The actual age may be substantially greater than 13.8 billion years, possibly much greater. Part 10 will develop this fully. That is the territory of a later episode in the series. The substrate as active architecture is now established with its constitutional character, empirical signatures, and conversion mechanism in place. We turn to the remaining component of layer 3 that has been engaged structurally but not yet articulated in its own right: energy. Part 7, Energy and the Layer 2/Layer 3 Boundary. Please join me in continuing our journey. The framework has now engaged matter as coherent vibration in the substrate, consciousness access through coherent organization, time as a layer 3 phenomenon, and the substrate as active architecture with its own constitutional character. The remaining structural component of layer 3 that has been engaged in passing but not yet articulated in its own right is energy. We have just developed the picture of layer 3 as an interoperable vibrational economy among three forms. Substrate energy is the organizational energy of the medium itself. Matter is what is produced when substrate energy is locally converted into coherent standing vibrational patterns that stabilize. Propagating energy is what flows through layer 3 as transient vibrational patterns. Our focus in this part of the episode is on matter and propagating energy and how they relate to each other, the two convertible forms within the larger three-form economy. The relationship between them is what mainstream physics has historically engaged through Einstein's mass-energy equivalence, and the framework's reading of that relationship is what we develop here. Energy and matter are not opposites. They are not separate substances. They are two states of the same underlying structure. Vibrational patterns in the resilient substrate, They differ in whether the pattern is bound and localized or free to propagate. Matter is the substrate in a state of coherent, topologically bound, self-reinforcing vibration. Part 3, what we covered in episode 2, developed this account. The properties we associate with matter, mass, charge, persistence, localization, all emerge from the coherent vibrational pattern itself. Energy is the other state. Energy is the substrate in a state of traveling, dispersing vibration, where matter's vibrational pattern is locked into a persistent configuration. Energy's vibrational pattern propagates through the substrate without being locked into a localized form. An energy particle is a traveling wave that moves through the medium and eventually disperses, transfers its vibration to another configuration, or transforms into another form. This distinction matters structurally. Energy cannot easily build complexity. A traveling vibration that propagates and disperses does not naturally lock into the hierarchical patterns that biological systems require. Matter, with its persistent, coherent character, builds complexity through hierarchical harmonic locking. This is why matter, not energy, serves as the substrate for biological evolution. Life requires matter not because matter is special in some metaphysical sense, but because matter's bound, coherent character is what hierarchical complexity needs. Energy could not have produced complex life. The framework holds that this asymmetry is structural rather than accidental, built into the architecture from the start. And yet matter and energy are mutually convertible. The two states are different configurations of the same underlying substrate dynamics. Einstein's mass-energy equivalence describes this mutual convertibility, and we will return to it shortly. The framework's distinctive claim about energy is structural. Energy operates at the boundary between layer 2 and layer 3 in ways that matter does not. Matter, as fully manifested coherent vibrational pattern within layer 3, exhibits the classical character that Newtonian physics described. Energy, as traveling vibration that operates at or near the rendering rate itself, exhibits the quantum mechanical character that 20th century physics revealed. The reason for this asymmetry is structural rather than scale-based. Newtonian physics describes layer 3 dynamics for fully manifested matter. Quantum mechanics describes layer 2 dynamics and the layer 2/layer 3 transition. The two descriptions are not competing accounts of the same phenomena at different scales. They are descriptions of different aspects of the architecture. Layer 3 dynamics for matter that is fully rendered, layer 2 and boundary dynamics for energy that operates at or near the rendering process itself. This is one of the framework's clearest architectural moves. The historical puzzle of why two different theoretical frameworks are needed in physics, classical and quantum, dissolves once we recognize that they are describing different layers of the architecture. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle is one of the most striking signatures of the boundary character. Werner Heisenberg established in the 1920s that certain pairs of physical properties, position and momentum, energy and time, cannot be simultaneously measured with arbitrary precision. Mainstream physics has treated this as a fundamental feature of quantum systems, with the irreducible uncertainty being a feature of nature at small scales rather than a limitation of measurement technology. The framework reads the uncertainty principle as the rendering granularity at the layer 2/layer 3 boundary made visible. The rendering process operates at a specific rate. The granularity of rendering, the smallest unit of vibrational pattern that can be resolved from layer 2 into layer 3, is what produces the irreducible uncertainty. The mathematics of the principle is preserved exactly. What is reframed is the source of the uncertainty. The uncertainty is not nature being intrinsically fuzzy. It is the visible signature of the rendering process operating with the specific granularity at the boundary. The same reading dissolves the historical puzzle of wave-particle duality. Light has been described as wave-like since Young's double-slit experiments in the early 19th century, and as particle-like since Einstein's account of the photoelectric effect in 1905. The two descriptions have seemed contradictory because they appear to attribute incompatible characters to the same phenomenon. The framework's reading is that light is neither purely wave nor purely particle. Light is a boundary phenomenon. It exhibits wave character when its propagation is engaged. It exhibits particle character when its interaction with matter is engaged. Both characters are aspects of what a boundary phenomenon naturally produces. The duality is not a contradiction requiring resolution. It is the expected manifestation of an entity operating at the boundary where layer 2 dynamics meet layer 3 manifestation. Photons are the paradigmatic example. The photon is unique among physical entities. It propagates at the rendering rate. From the photon's own frame, time does not pass. The entire journey from emission to absorption occurs in zero proper time. We engaged this directly in episode 4 when we developed the photon's frame as one of the empirical signatures of layer 2's timelessness. The photon does not occupy a stable position within layer 3 during its propagation. It does not persist at a location. It has no rest mass. It cannot be brought to rest. It always propagates at the rendering rate. Each of these features is consistent with the photon being a boundary phenomenon rather than a fully manifested layer 3 particle. When a photon is emitted from an atom, an electron transitions, and the energy difference is rendered into a photon at the boundary. The photon then propagates through the boundary. When absorbed, it transitions back into stable layer 3 manifestation. Energy is transferred to the absorbing atom. The photon is a boundary phenomenon throughout its existence. This brings us to Einstein's most famous equation. E equals mc squared expresses the equivalence between mass and energy, with the conversion factor being the rendering rate squared. The equation has been empirically confirmed across nuclear reactions, particle-antiparticle annihilation and creation, and stellar fusion. Its mathematical content is uncontested. What the equation means at the mechanistic level is the framework's contribution. When matter converts to energy, the coherent standing vibrational pattern that constituted the matter releases into traveling vibration. The three mechanisms that bind matter into its coherent form, self-reinforcing resonance, topological binding, and harmonic locking, disengage. The bound vibrational energy propagates as traveling waves through the substrate. When energy converts to matter, the reverse occurs. Traveling vibrational waves become locked into coherent standing patterns. The Higgs field supplies the resonance frequencies that anchor the new stable particles. The c-squared factor is not a mysterious mathematical constant. It is the energetic cost of crossing the boundary between persistent coherent form and transient propagating form within layer 3. The full rendering rate squared appears because the conversion involves traversing the boundary itself, the same boundary at which photons propagate, and the framework now extends the c-squared factor's significance. The matter-to-energy conversion that Einstein's equation describes is one instance of a more general pattern. The same c-squared factor governs every modal crossing within layer 3, not only matter to propagating energy and back, but also substrate energy to matter and substrate energy to propagating energy and back. The rendering rate is what it is. The cost of crossing any modal boundary within layer 3 is governed by the same rendering rate because the rendering process is unified rather than mode-specific. The Higgs boson detection we engaged at slide 10 is one instance of substrate to matter conversion governed by the same c-squared factor that mainstream physics has confirmed for matter to energy. The framework's claim is that mass energy conservation, confirmed empirically across every nuclear reaction and particle event ever measured, is the universal expression of c-squared as the layer 3 modal crossing cost. One conversion factor governs the entire interoperable vibrational economy. Every star that shines, every nuclear reactor that produces electricity, every particle accelerator that demonstrates pair creation, every Higgs boson detection at the LHC is engaging the same fundamental mechanism, vibrational form crossing modal boundary, with the c-squared factor reflecting the rendering rate at which the boundary is traversed. These are not exotic special cases. They are the everyday operation of coherence conversion across the physical universe. That is episode 5. The framework's account of layer 3's 3 structural components is now complete. The resilient substrate as active architecture, with its constitutional character as a field of organizational energy, its empirical signatures across multiple scales, and the substrate to matter conversion mechanism by which matter is produced. Matter as coherent vibrational binding, energy as boundary phenomenon, and coherence conversion partner to matter. The 3 forms participate in a single interoperable vibrational economy, with c-squared as the universal conversion factor and black holes as the cosmic scale regulator, maintaining the 9 to 91 calibration. Time has been situated as fully a layer 3 phenomenon. The components of manifest reality are in place. In episode 6, we turn to how the components interact, the 4 fundamental forces that mainstream physics identifies as the basic interaction modes within physical reality: gravity, electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force. The search for their unification has been one of physics' central projects for nearly a century. The framework reads the 4 forces as different modes of substrate coupling, with each force reflecting a particular way in which layer 3 entities couple to the substrate and to each other. We turn to it next. Until then, thank you for listening.